You claim the defendant, who has a child with your first cousin, is your son, Kiaris' biological father. Mr. Milford's done nothing for Kiaris, and you've dragged him to court to prove he is the father. You don't believe Mr. Johnson is your son. Police actions with air defense artillery while in the Army, which exposed you to radiation, making it impossible. What has Mr. Milford done for your son?
He didn't come to the hospital.
Nothing?
Nothing at all.
When the truth walks into the courtroom, ye hearts tremble, because once the DNA speaks, no lie can survive. In the heart of the television courtroom, where stories of love, betrayal, and law collide, Judge Lauren Lake stands as the voice of both compassion and consequence. Her courtroom isn't just about verdicts. It's about unveiling the deepest human truths, where science meets the soul, and where the DNA test becomes more than evidence. It becomes destiny. Every week, millions tune in not just to see outcomes, but to witness transformation. The fragile dance between law and justice, between what can be proven and what can only be felt. Each case that unfolds before Judge Lake begins as a battle of accusation and defense, but it always ends with the question that transcends them all. What happens when truth finally arrives? Because as many have learned, the truth changes everything. When people step into Judge Lake's courtroom, they don't just bring paperwork, witnesses, or allegations. They bring entire lives. Some come seeking answers, others come seeking redemption, but most come believing they're ready to hear the truth. Yet, as countless people regret taking DNA tests, what they often discover is that the truth can shatter the very story they've lived by for years. It's a modern phenomenon, this collision of science and emotion. In an age of podcasts, viral moments, and reality law hybrids, the paternity courtroom has evolved into a mirror reflecting our collective struggle with honesty. Programs like the Game-Changing Attorney podcast explore the intricate connections between advocacy, psychology, and justice. But nowhere are those connections more raw than in Lauren Lake's paternity court. Because here, the evidence stage in a divorce case isn't confined to legal briefs. It's about memory, heartbreak, and the stories parents tell their children to survive. The courtroom becomes the final frontier of truth, where lies dissolve and where the relationship between law and justice is tested, not in theory but in tears. When Judge Lauren Lake speaks, her words carry more than authority. They carry empathy. Her background in both law and counseling allows her to balance the two worlds seamlessly. Each case is a journey through jurisprudence, where the concept of justice isn't just philosophical, it's lived, breathed, and often wept over. She knows that the courtroom is not just about determining parenthood, but about restoring personhood. For many guests, it's a moment of celebrate recovery testimonies. Stories of men and women who have walked through deception, abandonment, and shame, and found clarity in the power of truth. When the results are read, the room holds its breath. The silence that follows is sacred. In that pause between uncertainty and revelation, lives are rewritten. Parents who once avoided responsibility find themselves collapsing in tears. Children who carried decades of doubt find an anchor for their identity. Some celebrate, some break, but all are transformed. Because in Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, justice isn't about punishment, it's about restoration. In one memorable case, a young man spent 26 years believing he knew his father. His mother had told him one story, his supposed father told another, and life unfolded in the middle of that confusion. Years later, the DNA test became the voice of truth. And though the results revealed what no one wanted to hear, that the man who raised him was not his biological father, it became a moment of painful liberation. Judge Lake looked into his eyes and said words that became a mantra for so many. The past cannot be changed, but today we can change the confusion you've lived with your entire life. That's the essence of this show, and the deeper truth behind every DNA test cheating story that reaches her courtroom. The tests expose lies, but they also reveal how deeply people crave love, validation, and belonging. Modern justice is not just about statutes and the Supreme Court's doctrines. It's about understanding the human heart, something Judge Lauren Lake does with remarkable grace. Her courtroom bridges that gap between reason and emotion, between the adverse inference in evidence act and the unpredictable chaos of human desire. It's a living exploration of what philosophers have long debated, that justice must not only be done, but be seen to be done. The cameras capture more than verdicts. They capture truth becoming visible. Across thousands of households, families gather to watch adoption stories' full episodes, or tales of mothers fighting for child support and fathers begging for a second chance. For some, it's entertainment. For others, it's education. But for those who've lived through it, these are not episodes. They are echoes of real life. Podcasts like the Divorce Course podcast and the Game-Changing Attorney podcast often dissect such moments, analyzing how legal frameworks intersect with human emotion. They discuss how attorneys must balance evidence with empathy, how a judge must maintain authority while extending understanding. But for Judge Lake, that balance isn't academic, it's instinctive. Her courtroom becomes a sanctuary where broken relationships confront the science of truth. The DNA test is both a sword and a shield. It can destroy illusions, but it can also protect innocence. It's the modern embodiment of proof, the digital fingerprint of fate. And yet, what makes her courtroom extraordinary is not just the science, but the humanity she restores after the science speaks. Behind every test, there's a story of hope. Behind every cheating accusation, a longing for love. Behind every tear, the universal question, who am I really? That's why these cases resonate far beyond television. They echo in podcasts, courtrooms, and social circles everywhere. They force us to ask, how do we define family? Is it biology or bond? Truth or tradition? Judge Lauren Lake stands in that fragile space, turning confusion into clarity and chaos into closure. She reminds viewers that while the truth changes everything, it also frees us from living a lie. In many Celebrate Recovery testimonies, guests later reveal how appearing before Judge Lake changed the course of their lives. Some reunited with estranged family members, others finally stopped running from their past. The courtroom became a form of therapy, a live demonstration of accountability wrapped in compassion. Even the harshest truths, infidelity, deception, neglect, become opportunities for transformation. Judge Lake often reminds her guests that healing begins where denial ends. And though the legal principles behind these cases draw upon centuries of jurisprudence, from the concept of justice in Aristotle's Ethics to modern applications of family law, the heartbeat of this show remains profoundly human. It's not just about who fathered whom. It's about responsibility, legacy, and the courage to face what the mirror of truth reflects. There's a recurring lesson in every episode, that truth does not destroy families, lies do. The DNA may separate, but the truth unites. When the test results are read and the courtroom falls silent, it's not just science at work, it's the sacred act of justice finding its voice. And for Judge Lauren Lake, every case is more than a ruling. It's a revelation. The power of truth has always been a double-edged sword in Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom. Each time the DNA envelope is handed to her, the room's oxygen changes. Parents clasp their hands, children stare into the unknown. The tension isn't just about biology, it's about belonging. And for those who've lived a lifetime under false assumptions, this moment represents something bigger than any verdict. It's the reckoning between love and law. It's no coincidence that millions of people describe paternity court as both a courtroom and a confessional. When the cameras start rolling, viewers don't just see a legal process. They see the unfolding of raw humanity. The courtroom becomes a sanctuary where people confront not only each other, but also themselves. And through it all, Judge Lauren Lake never forgets that justice isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about guiding them toward what's right. The modern world has made truth harder to hide. Technology has given us DNA testing, digital footprints, and records that never fade. But what it hasn't changed is the way truth feels. The sting of betrayal, the collapse of trust, the ache of realization. Those emotions are timeless. Every time someone walks into Judge Lake's courtroom demanding a DNA test, they believe it will bring peace. But as history has shown, many people regret taking DNA tests. Not because the results were false, but because they revealed what they were never emotionally ready to know. It's the paradox of proof. Science can confirm the facts, but it cannot soften the blow. And yet, as Judge Lake often reminds her courtroom, you can't heal from what you refuse to face. The courtroom thus becomes more than a stage for legal evidence. It becomes a stage for human courage. Episodes like, "Is her cousin's baby daddy also hers?" aren't just shocking because of their twists. They're profound because they mirror the complexity of real human relationships. Love, lust, loyalty. All these forces collide within the framework of justice. The relationship between law and justice has always been uneasy. Law is written, justice is felt. Law demands evidence, justice demands empathy. And Judge Lauren Lake, standing at that intersection, reminds us that every verdict is both legal and emotional. She quotes principles that echo through time, from the concept of justice in jurisprudence to the moral foundations of family law. But she also speaks the language of pain and redemption. She knows that evidence can end a case, but only honesty can begin healing. In one case, a woman broke down after years of denial, confessing that she had lied about her child's paternity out of fear of rejection. As Judge Lake read the results, proving that the man she'd named wasn't the biological father, the courtroom fell silent. But instead of condemnation, Lauren offered her understanding. She said, "This isn't the end of your story. It's the first honest chapter." Moments like this define the legacy of the courtroom. It's where truth doesn't just punish, it purifies. In the era of podcasts and long-form storytelling, the influence of this courtroom extends far beyond television. Programs like the Divorce Course podcast and the Game-Changing Attorney podcast analyze these real-life lessons, exploring how evidence, empathy, and advocacy shape the outcome of human conflict. They discuss the evidence stage in divorce cases, the fragile line between legal obligation and moral responsibility, and how the courtroom becomes a crucible for transformation. Listeners hear how a single DNA test can redefine an entire family's narrative, how a simple envelope can carry not just medical data, but the weight of generational trauma, how a truth once hidden can spark the long overdue conversation between parents, children, and the past. In this way, Judge Lake's cases become part of a global conversation, a study of what happens when truth changes everything. There's also a deeper, often overlooked dimension, one rooted in the adverse inference in the Evidence Act, the principle that silence, avoidance, or refusal to provide evidence can itself reveal guilt or fear. Many who come before Judge Lake have spent years avoiding the truth. Some refused tests in the past, others avoided responsibility, hoping denial would erase reality. But as every lawyer knows, and as Judge Lake often emphasizes, silence doesn't protect you from the truth, it just delays it. That's why her courtroom feels both ancient and modern at once. It reflects the wisdom of legal philosophy, the concept of justice in jurisprudence, but grounds it in the urgent realities of everyday life. For some, these episodes feel like watching a tragedy unfold. For others, they celebrate recovery testimonies in motion. Because when the truth finally emerges, something remarkable happens. People start to rebuild. Estranged fathers find the courage to connect. Mothers find relief in honesty. Children, once burdened by uncertainty, begin to form a sense of identity. That's the quiet brilliance of Judge Lake's courtroom. It isn't just about who's right or wrong, but about who's ready to grow. Even the Supreme Court has acknowledged, in various family law judgments, that the welfare of the child outweighs the pride of adults. That same principle echoes in every episode of Paternity Court. Judge Lake consistently reminds both parents that regardless of the DNA, the child did not ask to be here. In doing so, she redefines child support not merely as a financial duty, but as an emotional and moral one. The idea that being a parent requires more than biology. It requires presence, sacrifice, and truth forms the ethical backbone of her philosophy. Episodes featuring adoption stories often amplify this message. Some guests discover that their biological parents are strangers, while the ones who truly raised them were never connected by blood at all. And yet, in Judge Lake's words, family isn't just DNA, it's devotion. It's this duality, science versus soul, that keeps viewers and listeners captivated. Whether they're watching full episodes on television or discussing them on the Divorce Course podcast, people recognize their own struggles mirrored in these courtroom narratives. Because even outside of legal settings, every human relationship is a negotiation between truth and loyalty. Every family carries secrets, every couple carries doubts, and every truth carries the potential to heal or destroy. There's also the cultural impact to consider. In a society where DNA testing has become more accessible, the courtroom's lessons extend far beyond entertainment. These stories serve as modern parables, warnings about deception, reflections on accountability, and affirmations of how truth, no matter how painful, leads to freedom. For example, many DNA test cheating stories shared on podcasts reveal that people sought answers not to end love, but to restore trust. And yet when results came back unexpected, they had to face a truth larger than betrayal, the truth about themselves. As one guest once said in a follow-up interview, the DNA didn't just reveal who my child's father was, it revealed who I had become trying to hide it. Judge Lake's approach to justice aligns closely with restorative jurisprudence, a philosophy emphasizing reconciliation over retribution. In her courtroom, she embodies what legal theorists describe as practical justice, where law serves as a bridge between pain and peace. Even when she delivers hard truths, she does it with a tone of mentorship, not condemnation. Her courtroom may deliver verdicts, but her goal is always closure. This aligns deeply with what modern legal scholars call the humane face of justice, a recognition that behind every statute and every piece of evidence, there is a human being searching for meaning. For those who watch regularly, Paternity Court becomes less about who the father is and more about who we are. As people, as families, as a society struggling to reconcile emotion with evidence. It's the relationship between law and justice put on full display. It's a mirror held up to the human condition, one where truth must coexist with mercy. Judge Lake's greatest lesson, repeated through countless verdicts, is that truth isn't just found in a test, it's lived through responsibility. She teaches that the measure of character isn't whether you're right or wrong, but whether you're willing to do what's right after you learn the truth. In a world of lies, distractions, and half-told stories, her courtroom stands as a sanctuary of clarity. It's not entertainment, it's education wrapped in emotion, and though science provides the evidence, it's Lauren Lake who provides the humanity. Her words, calm, firm, and full of understanding, echo far beyond the courtroom doors. Justice doesn't live in the paperwork, it lives in how you respond when truth finds you. That's the lesson behind every DNA envelope. That's why so many who enter her courtroom in anger leave in silence, not defeated, but awakened. Because in the end, the truth changes everything. In Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, the sound of truth is louder than the gavel. It is the trembling silence after a DNA result, the breaking of a voice that says, "I'm sorry," the tear that rolls down a parent's cheek when years of denial come crashing down. This is not a place of spectacle. It's a sanctuary where people meet their reflection in the mirror of justice. Each case is more than a verdict. It's a story about identity, accountability, and the fragile bond between law and love. And it's in these stories that the relationship between law and justice reveals its most human face. Because for Judge Lauren Lake, justice isn't about winning, it's about becoming whole again. The courtroom, with its lights, cameras, and silent spectators, might appear to be a stage, but the real performance is the one life itself has already written. The years of deceit, the secrets buried under fear, and the guilt people carry like invisible chains. When the DNA test results arrive, they do not just answer biological questions. They expose emotional truths. They show what people are willing to believe and what they've been running from. Across countless episodes, we've seen people regret taking DNA tests, not because the tests lied, but because they stripped away the comforting illusions they had built. Yet, as Judge Lake often reminds them, regret fades, but truth endures. The truth is not cruel, it is cleansing, and her courtroom has become a place where that cleansing, no matter how painful, happens in front of the world. In one memorable moment, a young woman wept when the DNA proved that the man she thought was her father wasn't. But instead of collapsing into despair, she took a deep breath and whispered, "At least now I know." Judge Lake leaned forward and said gently, "Knowing is the first step toward healing." That's the spirit of this courtroom, where the concept of justice in jurisprudence becomes flesh and blood. It's no longer a theory debated in law schools or discussed in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast. It's the living, breathing experience of people confronting their pasts in real time. The stories echo far beyond television. They find new life in podcasts, legal discussions, and social media dialogues. Shows like the Divorce Course podcast use these cases as blueprints to explore accountability in modern relationships. Listeners connect deeply because these are not fictional dramas. They are mirrors reflecting how fragile human trust can be. Episodes about infidelity, DNA test cheating stories, and broken vows are not only legal battles, they are moral reckonings. They remind the world that every relationship has a hidden evidence file, not of paperwork, but of actions, silence, and truth avoided. Judge Lake's courtroom turns those hidden files inside out. Every testimony becomes a confession, every tear a piece of evidence, every silence an unspoken truth. It is here that truth changes everything, not just in the lives of those on screen, but in the hearts of those watching. At the heart of every paternity dispute lies the same question. What does it mean to be a parent? Biology is powerful, but Judge Lake shows that it is not the whole story. Parenthood is not just about sharing DNA, it's about sharing devotion. That's why her words resonate when she tells a reluctant father, a real man doesn't wait for proof to do what's right. She redefines fatherhood not as an obligation, but as an honor. She redefines motherhood not as sacrifice, but as strength. And she redefines justice not as retribution, but as restoration. Beyond the verdicts and results, there's an even deeper spiritual current running through her courtroom. You can feel it when she tells someone, "Today is your chance to start over." That's the language of redemption, the language of celebrate recovery testimonies. These aren't just stories of betrayal, they're stories of rebirth. People walk in with shame and walk out with clarity. The courtroom becomes a sacred space for confession, forgiveness, and renewal, because sometimes the most powerful kind of justice isn't about proving who was wrong. It's about helping someone find the courage to make things right. Many adoption stories that come before Judge Lake embody this philosophy. They reveal how love can transcend bloodlines, how strangers can become family, and how truth, even when it disrupts everything, can still lead to healing. One adopted man once said after an episode aired, "That courtroom gave me back my story." His words echo the very heart of Judge Lake's mission, to restore not just order, but dignity, to make sure no one walks out feeling less than human, even when the truth cuts deep. Legal scholars, often point to these cases as examples of applied jurisprudence, where legal principles meet emotional intelligence. The Adverse Inference in Evidence Act may govern how missing evidence is interpreted, but in Judge Lake's courtroom, missing truth is what she seeks most to uncover. When one party refuses a DNA test, she doesn't just quote the law, she appeals to conscience. She looks into their eyes and says, "If you're not afraid of the truth, then you have nothing to hide." It's a moment where the Supreme Court's cold precision meets the warmth of human empathy. Her work carries lessons for the wider legal world. Podcasts like The Game-Changing Attorney. Podcasts often discuss how emotional intelligence has become a necessary skill for modern attorneys. How the best lawyers today are not just strategists, but storytellers, psychologists and peacemakers. Judge Lake embodies all of those roles at once. She listens like a counselor, reasons like a jurist, and speaks like a preacher of truth. It's no wonder her courtroom has become a symbol of transformative justice, a process where truth is not just revealed, but redeemed. Every now and then, she turns her courtroom into a classroom. She talks about child support not as punishment for men, but as protection for children. She explains how justice isn't about division, but duty. And when emotions run high, she reminds both parents of a truth that transcends the test results. That child didn't ask to be here. You brought them here. Now show them what love looks like. That single line captures the essence of her courtroom. Compassion guided by consequence.